Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor.
I'm actually excited by the prospect of continuing the diatribe again, the rant against secular government, so to speak. Now, where should I start? French Revolution. Okay, today is July 14th, Bastille Day. When I was growing up, I wasn't Catholic, I was Jewish. And not only that, I didn't understand anything except about history, so I thought the French Revolution was absolutely wonderful. And it was, the bursting forth of freedom. So the French Revolution was a terrible thing. It was at the time of the French Revolution. What we learn in high school is that the kings were very decadent and depraved and self-indulgent. Louis XIV, spent all of the wealth of Paris on parties. It was a little bit like the Obama years, and Versailles and his castles and his aristocracy and his mistresses and everything, while the poor people were starving, and the church was totally corrupt, and the church hierarchy was sinful and was just in it for the money and so forth. Now, and that's why the French Revolution came about, because the peasants were starving to death and they were tired of being exploited. And they threw off all of this exploitation and superstition and everything and believed in liberty, equality, fraternity. And that was the beginning of the modern age. Now, first of all, about the conditions in France at the time of the French Revolution. Yes, the aristocracy absorbed a lot of money. However, things were no worse than they had been for at least a lifetime before. There were no wars going on. People were no poorer than they had been, 10 years earlier, 20 years earlier. They were pretty poor. A lot of people were pretty poor, but they weren't starving, and there was no new crisis of any sort. The king was actually really good. Louis XIV wasn't so good, but the king at the time of the French Revolution was actually probably a saint. Marie Antoinette was probably a saint. She never said, "Let them eat cake." And the revolution was imposed by the Cabal, essentially. It was imposed on the people. The people were not behind the revolution. They were not in favor of the revolution. They were in favor of the church, and they were in favor of the status quo and the monarchy. But you had a cabal, Masonically led, by the way, sort of like today. That's maybe why they don't want this show going out over the air. And you had an intelligentsia that were aggressively anti-God or atheist. You can think of Voltaire. You can think of the Marquis de Sade. You know the term sadist? Well, the word sadist, which refers, of course, to a very disgusting sexual perversion of inflicting pain, is named after the Marquis de Sade, who was a major influencer in society in those days, who, by the way, also was a pedophile and only liked young boys and girls. So what you had then was what you have now, basically, Well, you didn't have a Biden in the White House. You had a good king on his throne, but you had the revolutionary forces, the Masonic revolutionary forces, which right now run the U.S. country. They did not run France at the time, but they did when after the revolution. In other words, that's what the revolution was for. It was like getting rid of Trump and putting in the Biden administration, getting rid of the king and the queen and putting in the revolutionary government, which immediately went into a reign of terror and suppressed the church. Suppressed the church so violently. First of all, the French Revolution was organized in Masonic lodges. The planning meetings were done under the hanging head of somebody that they had decapitated. I don't remember who it was. It was organized by Freemasons. It was aimed at the church to destroy the church. It was not aimed at emancipating the people. The liberty, equality, fraternity was hooey, just like Build Back Better, just like, what was Obama's stock phrase, hope and change. Okay, so it's just hope and change. And it was like Mao's liberation and so forth, which was enslavement. Now, in order to crush the church, first of all, they took over the church. The revolutionary government took over the church and reformed. There were no longer, the dioceses were done, basically states became dioceses. The bishops were put in by the government, not by the Pope. And any priest who did not swear an oath of allegiance to the state rather than to the Pope was stripped of his position, was no longer a priest, and many of them were killed. About 30,000 priests were exiled, and thousands of priests and religious were killed. So much so that the guillotine was not fast enough to kill all the nuns and religious. So they developed this technology of drownings, mass drownings. They were called noyades. There's the noyade that was on the show card. And what you see there, it was done on the river, and they would go out in barges with priests and nuns, and they would tie their hands and their feet, and they would sink the barge or push them overboard and drown them en masse, thousands of them. And in order to further humiliate them and torture them, in fact, they had what they called, I think they called them people's marriages. This is what they did. They tied priests and nuns, they stripped them, and they tied them together in couples, a priest and a nun, naked. And then they drowned them together, and they called it underwater marriages. Right? It's just all about sacrilege and blasphemy. Let me get that off the picture there. Okay, let me get those away from there. Okay. And they wanted to stamp out the church completely. So of course, if there were 7 days to a week, people could still know what day was Sunday and try to observe Sunday, although they couldn't legally observe Sunday. So they changed the calendar to have 10-day weeks. So there was no such thing. I mean, you couldn't even imagine what a Sunday was because it was a 10-day week. And they converted the churches into temples of reason. And the story is that they desecrated the churches by having prostitutes perform on the altar. That's the French Revolution, okay? That is this great thing that they send up fireworks today and celebrates. So let's see. Tens of thousands of priests and religious were executed. There's a beautiful movie, Song of the Scaffold. It's also a book, Song. It's either Song from the Scaffold or Song of the Scaffold. And it's the account of the Carmelite nuns, the Carmelite convent in Paris, where all of the sisters were guillotined, and they sang the Te Deum, I believe, each of them, on their way to the guillotine. It's a true story. And one of them, I think the superior, actually volunteered. In other words, she was out of town, and I think she came back to be martyred with the other sisters. Anyway, let's see. And that's enough, actually. But that is the nature of the French Revolution. Now, free speech. I have to get to free speech. Free speech is a modern invention. The concept of free speech was basically, I don't want to say it was introduced by the French Revolution, but it was introduced in conjunction with the French Revolution. It was introduced with the Enlightenment. There were blasphemy laws in every country in the world. Even today, there are blasphemy laws in 71 countries, I think, around the world. But there were blasphemy laws in every country. Let me read you some blasphemy laws in the United States. Okay, the Massachusetts General Laws. Whoever willfully blasphemes the holy name of God by denying, cursing, or reproaching God, his creation, government, or final judging of the world, or by cursing or reproaching Jesus Christ or the Holy Ghost, or by cursing or reproaching or exposing to contempt and ridicule the holy word of God contained in Holy Scriptures, shall be punished by imprisonment in jail for not more than 1 year, or by a fine of not more than $300, and also be bound to good behavior. Okay? This is Massachusetts. This is after the Constitution. This is Massachusetts General Laws when it was a state already. The Constitution, right? What about the free speech in the Constitution? Well, continually, the courts ruled that free speech doesn't include the right to blasphemy. Okay? And as recently, I don't have everything in front of me that I'd like to have because I don't plan well enough. But as recently as 1868, the courts ruled that prosecuting blasphemy was consistent with religious liberty. Anti-blasphemy laws which targeted malicious reviling of God or religion were not contradicted by the free speech, freedom of speech. In other words, freedom of speech did not allow for blasphemy. Freedom of speech, here, let me read this paragraph so that it's a little more coherent. From the founding era, when the country ratified the First Amendment, that's the Free Speech Amendment, through Reconstruction, that's after the Civil War, that's 1868, Americans viewed blasphemy prosecutions as compatible with free religious exercise. The same state legislatures that ratified the Free Exercise Clause of speech passed statutes that criminalized blasphemy. And the same public that ratified the state religious freedom provisions convicted defendants charged with blasphemies. When defendants appealed their convictions under both the federal and state provisions, appellate judges affirmed that prosecuting blasphemy was consistent with religious liberty. So prosecuting blasphemy is not a contradiction of religious liberty, and it's not a contradiction of free speech. Okay? However, we all know that blasphemy is permissible now. Now, I'm going to get a little controversial, not that I ever get controversial. But there is a famous artist, so-called artist, I wouldn't call him an artist, I would certainly call him a blasphemer and a hater of God. There's no problem with that, calling him that. His name is Sereno, or Serena. Let me pull him up here. Because again, I never know what I'm going to do here. Sereno was his name, is his name. And I'll pull up a picture here of this charming young man. There, he looks quite perverse to me, but I don't know anything about his personal life. But he's a so-called artist. Now I'm going to get rid of the picture because it's nauseating. Excuse me, but I think it is nauseating. So take a good look, and now I'll make him disappear. Okay. And he is famous for his blasphemous artwork, including a artwork which was called, I don't want to say it, PISS, Christ, which consisted of a crucifix submerged in a jar of his own urine. Oh no, I'm lost again. Okay, I am going to continue. I am going to continue now. I'm back on. I'm sorry about the dropouts, but I don't know where I dropped out, and I'm not going to go back to repeat myself. So, but I will put this up as a separate thing, so you can watch it uninterrupted if you wish. Okay, so you had this Sereno guy, and I hope it was dropped out when he was up there. He is a so-called artist. He's famous for a artwork which consisted of a crucifix submerged in a jar, a glass jar, transparent jar of his own urine. And this artist, who is clearly a blasphemer, was not only not guilty of a crime, but apparently even in the eyes, even in the eyes of, maybe I shall just show the picture rather than commenting on it, because I wouldn't want to get in trouble here, right? There is, who, not only honoring Sereno, the artist, in the Sistine Chapel, by the way, no less, but giving him a thumbs up. Okay? Now that is how condemned blasphemy is, not only by the secular state, but apparently by the hierarchy of the church. Not only did he receive him and give him the thumbs up, but I will show you where he received him. This is where he received him, okay? So you might recognize the artwork on the walls. The Sistine Chapel. The Sistine Chapel, the icon of religious devotional art, the icon of art adoring God, reflecting the Catholic faith, celebrating the Catholic faith, honoring God, honoring Jesus, honoring the story of salvation. That is where chose to honor Sereno and the other artists. I think there were 300 artists there. Okay. Now that's where blasphemy stands in terms of it being disapproved of or made illegal. However, I'm actually lying to you, okay? But it's a strategic lie, because in fact, we have blasphemy laws in the United States. Haven't you noticed that we have blasphemy laws in the United States? See, what happens, and I talked about this yesterday, is if you don't put God, basically there's no such thing as a non-religious government or as a secular government. If you don't put God in charge of your government, you end up having Satan in charge of your government. Literally, okay? We have a theocracy. It's a satanic theocracy. Before the French Revolution, Europe had Christian theocracies. Christ was honored as the lawgiver. God, who created everything that is, also gave mankind laws to obey. And although the states did not enforce, by and large, the obeying of ritual laws. In other words, it was legal. Let's say it was legal in France. It was legal in the Papal States to be a Jew or to be a Muslim or to be an atheist, probably. However, you still weren't allowed to work on Sundays, or you still couldn't blaspheme. You still couldn't have pornography. In other words, the laws reflected God's laws, even if they did not enforce a religion. They did encourage a religion, they did favor a religion, but they did not enforce a religion. Okay. However, now we have a theocracy with Satan in charge, which is much more heavy-handed than the Christian theocracies were. Okay, we do have blasphemy laws. Didn't you know we have blasphemy laws? Let me pull up some blasphemy laws or evidence of blasphemy laws that we have today. And I don't know if any of you can. Boy, I need a producer. I can't do these shows with scripts. I don't know enough beforehand. Okay. Do you want to see some evidence of current blasphemy laws? Okay, let me give you some evidence of current blasphemy laws. These are just, there's zillions of these examples. I googled pastor arrested homosexuality or something like that, or pastor arrested, I think for arrested homosexual sin. 7,000 hits. 7,000 hits. Although I must admit that I Googled it on Yandex.com and not on Google because I thought Google might censor this. So here's one. Man arrested for quoting Bible on homosexual sin. London police arrested American citizen, a 49-year-old retired sheriff and California chaplain, for publicly reading the Bible outside of the Wimbledon tennis championships because he read the Bible in its condemnation of homosexuality. So you see, we do have blasphemy laws. Criticizing homosexuality is blasphemy. And even, I mean, there's zillions of these. You don't need me for this. But even, where is it? Even saying that there are two genders, is blasphemy. Let me just check that you're seeing what I think you're seeing. Yeah. Here you have another example. This school is a Massachusetts school, and the ban was upheld by the courts. That a student wearing a T-shirt that said there are only two genders was banned from going to school with that T-shirt. So it was blasphemous that there are only two genders. Okay, these are blasphemy laws, don't you see? My point is not just to have fun. My point is, you do not have a non-religious government. That's not an option. You can have a religious government under God, or you can have a religious government under Satan. And what we have now is a religious government under Satan. And one of the evidences is we have blasphemy laws, very serious blasphemy laws. People going to jail for blasphemy. Only not for insulting God, but for defending God. Okay? Not for arguing against God's law, but arguing for God's law. Okay, so let me see what other little, tidbits I have up here for you. So this is all over the world, these satanic blasphemy laws. This is, I believe, in South Africa, and a pastor jailed for preaching against homosexuality. A pastor in Cape Town has been sentenced to 30 days in prison after disregarding court orders prohibiting him from preaching about homosexuality. This one is Swedish. A Swedish pastor faces jail for preaching against homosexuality. We have Finland. I mean, one thinks of the Scandinavian countries as very liberal-minded, but there you had Sweden, there you had Finland. Liberal-mindedness only goes one way, of course. It only goes in the satanic direction. It never goes in God's direction. Okay, a Finnish MP, member of parliament, that's like congressperson, right? Senator, faced jail for tweeting a Bible quote on homosexuality. It's a Finnish one. And here we have our own California. And I'll just read a little bit of what it says, and then I am going to actually close the show with reading some genuine Catholic writing about church and state, so to speak, or secularism. Okay, it's the law in California. Those who willfully and repeatedly refuse to use a transgender nursing home resident's preferred name or pronouns can be slapped with a $1,000 fine and up to 1 year in prison, according to the California Health and Safety Code. This is known as the LGBT Senior Bill of Rights. Now I'm gonna get a little bit more edifying, I hope. So let me read the antidote to this. It's a little palate cleanser. Okay. So let me read again from Cardinal P, or Pius, from Poitiers, France, in the second half of the 19th century. Jesus Christ has been constituted King of Kings. Yes, and the true glory, the true nobility of kings ever since the preaching of the gospel, has consisted in being the lieutenants of Jesus Christ on earth. Has the greatness of kings been diminished by the crosses glittering atop their crowns? Have their thrones been less renowned or less secure on account of their kingship being recognized as an emanation of and participation in the kingship of Jesus Christ? Jesus Christ is King, and the true dignity, the true liberty, the true emancipation of modern nations lies in their right to be governed in a Christian manner. Have such nations fallen short of their glory? Has their fate been less noble, less happy, on account of their ruling scepters being bound to submit to the scepter of Jesus? Let it be repeated, brethren, Christianity does not reach its full development, its full maturity, where it does not take on a social character. Christ does not reign if his church is not mistress, if the people cease to pray to Jesus Christ, to his doctrine, if the people cease to pay tribute to Jesus Christ, to his doctrine, to his law, a national homage. When the Christianity of a country is reduced to the bare proportions of the domestic life, when Christianity is no longer the soul of public life, of public power, of public institutions, then Jesus Christ deals with his country in the manner he is dealt with there. He continues to give his grace and his blessings to the individuals who serve him, but he abandons the institutions, the powers which do not serve him. And the institutions, the kings, the nations become like shifting sand in the desert. They fall away like the autumn leaves which are gone with the wind. The main error, the capital crime of this century, is the pretension of withdrawing public society from the government and law of God. The principle laid at the basis of the whole modern social structure is atheism of the law and of the institutions. Let it be disguised under the names of abstention, neutrality, incompetence, or even equal protection. Let us even go to the length of denying it by some legislative dispositions for details, or by accidental and secondary acts. The principle of the emancipation of the human society from the religious order remains at the bottom of things. It is the essence of what is called the New Era. You see, I'm going back to the French Revolution. This is a French cardinal. He's referring to the French Revolution. Now, the principle placed at the base of the modern social edifice, this has been the atheism of the law and of institutions. Even the pagan, it is the essence of what we call the modern times. Even the pagan sages of ancient Greece and Rome understood that one can more easily build a city in the air than a society apart from the worship of God. The modern society only recognizes its rulers and leaders as those who are rebels against the Lord and his anointed, and who refuse to be constrained by the Lord's bonds and yoke. These secularists wish to consign to oblivion any notion of the Christian state, Christian law, and of the Christian prince. What it follows is no longer the sweet yoke of Christ, but absolute bondage. Here, the imaginary theocracy of the church is replaced with theocracy as absolute as it is illegitimate, the theocracy of Caesar, head and arbiter of religion, supreme oracle of doctrine and law. This is a renewed pagan theocracy, soon to be carried out in the reign of high priest people and of the God state through socialism. Politics without God has a name. In the gospel it is called the prince of this world or the power of the beast, but today it is called the revolution. Cardinal P is pointing out you do not have a non-theocratic state. You are always going to have a spiritual power driving the mechanism of government. If that spiritual power is not God through Christ, it's going to be Satan. And instead of having the sweet yoke of Christ, you are going to have the absolute bondage that Satan wants to impose on mankind. And that's what you do if you take God out of the public square, if you take God out of the government, if you take God out of the schools. You haven't left them empty. You have made space for Satan to come in. And that, my brothers and sisters, is what we have here today. But it's Bastille Day. I didn't want Bastille Day to go to go unremarked on. I mean, what we have done is we have turned over our social institutions, our children, and our government to the pagan gods of the Aztec Empire, to the pagan gods, of ancient civilizations. Those pagan gods, by the way, you know this, if you've seen the pictures of Aztec gods or of Hindu gods and goddesses, they're transgendered, they're hermaphroditic. In other words, there's gender confusion and there's homosexuality. They're gods of homosexuality. The Aztecs certainly had a very powerful god of homosexuality and so forth. And there is a wonderful, well, it's not a wonderful book, it's a terrible book. It's because it's written by a pro-homosexual homosexual. It's called The Construction of Homosexuality. And one of the points he makes in that book is there's something fundamentally wrong about Judaism and Christianity, because Judaism and Christianity are the only religions in the history of the world that do not embrace homosexuality. So either there's something very wrong with them, or my point would be there's something wrong with all the other religions. So thank you for watching, and I'll be back.
Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor, cui puerile decus, prompsitos sana